Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the 5 best class setups you guys can use for the M4A1. And the reason I'm making this video is because I see a lot of videos about loadouts that are the best for Warzone. But I know a lot of people that are just like me that kind of just like to use just a few guns that they really feel comfortable with. My favorite gun personally is the M4, and I wanted to make a video talking about what attachments are good for what situations and what 5 setups that I have in my loadouts all the time to be able to use. Since I love the M4, I want to be very versatile with it, with the attachments and what I can be able to do with it during the game. I need to mix it up a little bit. Alright guys, so before we get started, I just wanted to let you guys know that I actually don't use an optic on most of my classes, but if you guys do prefer to use the optics, that's perfectly fine. All you have to do is take off either the stock or the rear grip. In the description, there's going to be timestamps for each and every single one of the classes. You guys can check down below and skip to whichever ones you guys want to see. Now moving on to our first class, we have our one shot, one kill class. And by the name, I'm sure you guys can tell that this is our M4 with a sniper. For our attachments for our M4, we're going to be using first the monolithic suppressor. The monolithic suppressor we're actually using in every single one of our classes. It's actually really strong because it gives us sound suppression and damage range. The sound suppression is going to keep us off the minimap, and the damage range is going to help us in a lot of those long range fights we get in Warzone. For our second attachment, we're going to be running the stock M16 Grenadier, which gives us damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control. A lot of people don't realize that the Crovis and the stock M16 Grenadier are very similar, but the stock M16 Grenadier actually gives us more stats, but a little less mobility as the negative, and the Crovis does give us a little bit more ability, but a little less of those stats. For our third attachment, we're going to be using a 60 round mag. The 60 round mag is super useful for getting our full kills when we get downs, and super helpful in longer fights. For our next attachment, we're going to be running the stippled grip tape, which gives us ADS and sprint to fire speed. And these things are actually going to help us out a lot because they're actually fighting the negatives that the other attachments are giving us. And for our last attachment, we're going to be running no stock. No stock is going to help us a lot since, of course, the M4 is going to be our main gun when we're not sniping. No stock gives us a lot of movement speed, which we're going to need to be able to move around the map just a little bit quicker. For our secondary, of course, we're going to be using a sniper. For this instance, I'm going to be using the AX50 because I do prefer the AX50 over the HDR. Of course, you can use the HDR if you want to, but I'm just going to be going over the AX50 in this video. So for the attachments for the AX50, I'm going to be using the monolithic suppressor, the 32-inch factory barrel, the tac laser, thermal sniper scope, and the Singuard arms marksman. I do know some people don't like the thermal scopes, and of course it's perfectly fine if you don't like the thermal scopes. All you have to do is remove the thermal scopes, and you can actually add on either sleight of hand, which does give you the extra reload speed, or you can add the stipple grip tape. Now moving on to our perks. In our first slot, we're going to be using EOD. We actually use EOD in our first slot for every single one of the classes that we're going to be going over. The reason I'm using EOD is because it does give us a lot of survivability against things like RPGs and C4 when all the lethals that people are actually running are explosive, so it will help us out a lot. I do know some people do like to use cold-blooded. I don't personally like to use cold-blooded because I feel like I'm still getting sniped even when I'm running it, and it definitely is easy to still snipe people with the thermal when they do have cold-blooded. Double time is also a really popular one because it gives you a lot of extra movement speed to move around the map, but again, I do like the survivability that EOD provides. For our second perk, of course, we're going to be using overkill since we are using 2 primary weapons. For our third perk, we're going to be using amped, which helps us switch our weapons faster and get into the positions where when we see an easy snipe, we can easily switch our weapons and get right into the sniping position. Now moving on to the lethal. For this class setup, we are going to be using the C4, which is actually really strong for the fact that we can use it as almost like a grenade when we're going into buildings and to blow up vehicles. And for our tactical, we're going to be using the heartbeat sensor. Now moving on to our second class, which is the explosive specialist class. By the name, I'm sure you can assume that this class is the M4 with an RPG as our secondary. This means we have to focus on a lot of ADS speed and close range fighting since we're going to be using our M4 to whip onto people as our main weapon. Once again, for our first attachment, we're going to be using the monolithic suppressor. For our next attachment, we're going to be using the Crovis custom marksman. The reason this is good in this situation is because the RPG is our secondary weapon and we definitely don't want to be running around with the RPG out. For our next attachment, we're going to be using the tac laser to help us in a lot of those close range battles. Next, we're going to be using the 60 round mags because we don't have a secondary to switch to at any point during the game just to finish off a down or anything. And for that reason, the 60 round mag is going to be super useful. And for our last attachment, we're going to be using no stock again for the movement speed just to be able to move around the map and position a little bit better. So this class is actually a little bit more of a support role where you can sit back and RPG buildings as your teammates are running into them and also blow up a lot of vehicles that are coming towards you guys and getting a lot of kills that way also. Now moving on to our perks. For our first slot, again we are running EOD. In our second slot we're running Ghost, and in our third slot we're running Amped. And for our lethal and tactical, they're also staying the same as C4 and the heartbeat sensor. Now moving on to our third class, we're going to be using our Mo Ammo, Mo Problems class setup. The reason we call it Mo Ammo, Mo Problems is because we're actually running fully loaded in this class setup. If you guys don't know what fully loaded is, it's actually a weapon perk that is super useful in a lot of situations where basically right when you get your loadout, you get full AR ammo or full ammo for whatever gun you're running fully loaded on. This can be good in a lot of situations for like when you're dropping down in the middle of the game and you just get revived and you need to drop on your loadout, but you don't have a lot of time to loot or even get loot from anywhere, or you don't have any ammo. So it's really great to just drop, get your loadout, and then grab fully loaded and then have full ammo in your guns. So what we're going to be running for our attachments on our M4 this time around is the monolithic suppressor, as always. For the barrel, we're going to be running the Crovis Custom. The reason we're running the Crovis here is because we don't know where our loadout might be. We might need to be able to run around a little bit more and get to a different position. And for that reason, we're going to be running the Crovis. For the same reason, to up our mobility, we're going to be running the 50 round mag instead of the 60. On this class, I actually do run a sight only because I feel like at the end of the game, shots do matter a little bit more when you can't just spray at people randomly. I think that the little bit of extra accuracy that the sight does provide at the end of the game really is worth it. Of course, for our last attachment, we're going to be running fully loaded in the weapon perk. As our secondary, we're going to be running the Renetti. I think the Renetti is actually one of the strongest secondaries in the game, and it actually competes with the snake shots that a lot of people know and really hate. So for the attachments I'm running on it, I currently do not have it leveled up all the way, so I don't have all the attachments I'd like. But I'm running for the muzzle, monolithic suppressor. The barrel is the MK1 extended, the 5MW laser. Trigger action, we have the lightweight trigger. And for our perk, we have the Akimbo. Once you unlock it to level 42, you unlock the 3 round burst. And of course, you'd want to use that for your trigger action. And you can also take away the muzzle and change it onto the ammunition just to get a little more ammo in your clip so you can fight maybe 1 or 2 more people before you have to reload. Now, moving on to our perks, we are going to be running EOD in our first slot, and since we do not have a primary or anything as our secondary, Ghost is going to be really efficient here, especially at the end of the game when a lot of people have heartbeat sensors and maybe even some UAVs. This is going to keep you off the map and a little bit more hidden. In our third slot, we're still going to be running Amped. Our lethal and tactical are going to be the same, staying as the C4 and the heartbeat sensor. If you don't want to run the heartbeat sensor at the end of the game, there are a few really good options like a smoke grenade and even a stun grenade towards the end of the game can really help out. Now going on to easily my favorite class out of all of them is my full range loadout. So the reason I call it my full range loadout is we have our M4 working as our laser beam from long to mid range. Then we're going to be running the MP5 as our secondary for our close range combat. For the attachments we're going to be using on the M4, we're going to start off with the monolithic suppressor. Our second attachment is the stock M16 Grenadier. For our third attachment, we're going to be using the Ranger foregrip, and this is really going to help us track when people are running around and control the recoil. For our last 2 attachments, we're going to be using the 60 round mag and the stippled grip tape. Moving on to our secondary, which is the MP5, we have our muzzle, which is going to be the monolithic suppressor for a little bit of range and sound suppression. For our next attachment, we're going to be using the commando foregrip to keep the recoil in check. For our second attachment, we're going to be using the commando foregrip just to keep the recoil in check. Our next attachment we're going to be using is the 45 round mag because I feel like the 30 rounds just aren't enough. I tried the other rounds the MP5 had and I didn't think they were strong enough. The next attachment we're going to be using is the stippled grip tape for close range. For our last attachment, we're going to be using the FTAC collapsible for the stock, and this is going to give us a lot of movement speed and ADS speed. For our perks, we're going to be using EOD in our first slot, Overkill in our second slot, and Amped in our third slot. And for our lethal and tactical, they are staying the same once again as C4 and the heartbeat sensor. Now moving on to our last class, which is actually my secret setup that I use whenever I'm actually trying to win games and try my hardest, because it is by far the most OP class that I have. Definitely one of the strongest M4 setups in the game. So to start off, we're actually using the same M4 setup as the last one with the MP5. Our M4 is running for the muzzle, the monolithic suppressor. The barrel, we're running the stock M16 Grenadier. The underbarrel, we're running the Ranger foregrip. For our ammo, we are running the 60 round mag, and lastly for our rear grip, we are running the stippled grip tape. Now for our secondary, here's where the strength really comes in, because we're using the snake shots as our secondary. The snake shots right now are probably the most OP gun in the game. They're the most annoying and they're the worst to die from. But at the same time, like I said, when you're trying really hard and you want to win games, it's definitely the way to go, just to give yourself the same advantage and be on the same playing field as everybody else. To get the snake shots, what you guys are going to need to put onto it, for the barrel, you need a .357 snub nose. For the laser, you're going to use the 5MW laser. For trigger action, you're going to use the lightweight trigger. Ammunition, you're going to use snake shot. And the perk, you're going to be using akimbo. Now moving on to the perks, we're using EOD, Ghost, and Amped. Our lethal and tactical are staying the same as the C4 and heartbeat sensor. I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, definitely hit that like button and subscribe to stay tuned for more content coming soon. Definitely let me know any changes that you guys would make to any of these classes in the comments. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Let's go! Wait, there's another one, right? No?
Wait, it says 2 people.
Oh, he had self-res. I didn't finish him.